City of Stevens Point Personnel Committee meeting, recorded July 8, 2024.
I'll call the Personnel Committee meeting to order at 6:17 p.m. Can we get a roll call?
Alder Kneebone?
Here.
Alder Broderick?
Here.
Alder Lang? Here. Alder Guthrie?
Here.
Alder Steinmetz?
Here.
Looks like everybody's here. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is from Chief Cuso requesting out-of-state travel for Assistant Chief Williams to attend the Department of Homeland Security Leadership Academy in Glencoe, Georgia. Chief?
Yes, since we moved here in 2017 into this building, we've been fortunate enough to host a lot of training. And Department of Homeland Security came last week, and they did a 4-day teaching or training on active shooter in schools, bringing everybody throughout Wisconsin here to Stevens Point. Because we hosted it, they're offering us a spot in the Department of Homeland Security Leadership Academy, which is down in Georgia. And because we hosted this, it's actually free of charge. They're going to pay for transportation, they'll pay for meals, they'll pay for housing, so it's not costing the city anything, and it's not going to cost the Stevens Point Police Department anything either. So I'm just requesting approval to let her travel to Georgia.
Okay.
Before we go too far, if someone's making a motion, the Police and Fire Commission has not yet considered this, so if you're moving
Pending.
approval, I would do it pending
Right.
the PFC approval.
Correct.
And
They meet tomorrow?
They meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
right. And as the Alder Liaison of Police and Fire, I'm going to take advantage of the position of being a chair to move approval of this request pending approval by the Police and Fire Commission tomorrow.
I'll be honored to second.
Any comments from anyone? I just want to say this community is very lucky to have the expertise that Chief Williams brings to her position. I think this just enhances the training opportunities for your staff and will provide us with a much safer, even safer community. So can't beat this deal.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Any comments from anybody in the audience? Alder Morrow.
Sean Morrow, Alder, Area 11. One thing that I would stress is that the training like this is very, very important because you never think anything like Uvalde or any of these mass shootings or anything could really happen here. And I bet that's what all those other areas thought as well. So any chance that we get to get any training at all, I think we should really take full advantage of. Thank you.
Any other comments? Comments from the committee or questions? Okay, let's call for a vote. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Opposed would be no. Seeing no objections, that is passed.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is from our Public Works Director, Badouin, requesting to hire a limited-term employee, maintenance mechanic at the Public Works Department. Director Badouin.
Nothing else to add other than the memo. We just find ourselves in a need for someone to fill in temporarily to keep up with everything that's going on.
Any questions from the committee for the director?
Is there a contingency in case we're in a situation where the candidate needs to have a CDL and doesn't have one?
Really wouldn't be necessary this time of year. We have more than enough for the types of functions that we do, number of trucks we would have rolling.
Thank you.
My only question is that if we find ourselves needing to extend this, there are scenarios where you might like to, is there anything we can do proactively to allow for up to 6 months or a continuation if we find ourselves in need?
No, generally an LTE, especially in this case, is just to carry us over till the full-time position gets hired.
Yeah.
So the authorization for the full-time position is there. The LTE, you don't need to put an end date on it. If you choose to, you can. I would recommend against that. That way the staff has the flexibility. If we need an LTE for 6 weeks or 6 months, they have that.
Any other comments, questions? I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move approval.
Motion from Lang, second from Broderick. Comments from the audience? Any other comments from the committee? Okay, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor would vote aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed would vote nay. I forget he's a little bit on a lag time.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Not a problem. Hearing no objections, that motion is passed. Item number 4, Director Konoski requests to create an electrical inspector position within the Community Development Department to replace the plumbing inspector. Director.
So Scott Omernick, who was our plumbing inspector, was promoted to the chief building official. DJ Schneider, who was in that position, served as the chief building official and the city's electrical inspector. And so because now we have this gap in the qualified individuals that can do electrical inspections within the department, we need to backfill that. The city of Stevens Point's one of the few delegated municipalities in the state. In order for us to maintain that status, which allows us to do plan review in-house, we must have that position filled for plan review and for inspections. We did hire an emergency LTE. Some folks might recall Dave Everson was a longtime city employee, was our longtime electrical inspector. He is stepping in temporarily until we can find somebody, but because this is technically a renewed position within the department, we do need to bring this through personnel, so would recommend approval as presented.
Any questions from the committee for the director? Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Okay. Motion to approve by Broderick.
Happy to second.
Okay, second by Guthrie. Any comments from people in the audience?
Looks like Corey's got something he wants to say.
I'm sorry.
Looks like Corey has something he wants to say.
Well, he's up next.
Oh, okay. I thought you looked very anxious.
Since it always has to do with salaries and money,
Everything's money.
perhaps.
It's just
our
Corey, he's
Guthrie
always
treasurer
anxious.
wanted-
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor would vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Let's see, next item. We're getting all the directors up here today, I'll tell you. Comptroller Treasurer Laddick requesting an overlap for the finance officer manager and the deputy comptroller treasurer position. Comptroller
Yes.
Treasurer Laddick.
Thank you. So it's one position, and after 36 years, the Deputy Comptroller Treasurer, Carrie Freeberg, is retiring. So it is certainly a big loss for the city because we've got decades of experience that's going out the door. So that's why I'm so anxious. Basically, we're looking for a 3-month overlap to help train that new position so that we can hire a replacement and have a smooth transition between the new deputy comptroller treasurer, whoever that happens to be, and the old deputy, or the former, I guess soon to be former deputy comptroller treasurer. So.
Any questions for the director from the commission?
Yeah, I have a question. So based on the memo, you're requesting an overlap of up to 3 months, but I imagine this is contingent on how long it takes to actually get the position filled, and I know sometimes they can sit vacant for a little bit. Like, would we consider an overlap of 3 months to start on the date that this new candidate is hired to make sure there's enough training overlap there?
We certainly could. So I guess if we approve it as an overlap of up to 3 months, and then if there's a delay, I'd obviously have to talk to, Deputy Comptroller Freeberg to see if she's willing to stay a little bit longer, or if she's completely out of here. That's a conversation that we'd have to have. So
So this assumes that, like, we have somebody before September? Is that the idea? Like we
Well,
have them hired?
so the intention would be to offer the position potentially early September, because for some positions, they like you to give a full month notice to your former employer. So this would allow that person to give enough notice to the former employer. So we would be looking at potentially offering the position early September and then starting it on September 30th. And if the person is, only needs to give 2 weeks notice or something, well, I know as someone myself who at times has positions that become vacant, more notice is always better. It's always appreciated. So this would allow that person to extend some courtesy to their current employer.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
I just have a comment. It seems well conceived, and I hope that it goes as planned, and I hope you'll revisit this body if you need help and support to bridge right? This is going to be a big bridge to travel through as a team. So thanks for conceiving of this plan, and we'll be supporting it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you're getting into city finances, you want to be able to train as long as you can, and with all the expertise that Carrie has. Is 3 months enough?
Honestly, we could use more, but we'll make it work with 3 months.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the plan as presented in the agenda packet.
Motion by Guthrie to approve, second by Steinmetz. Any other questions, comments from the audience? Alder Christensen.
I just want to note that I think it's not really an expenditure, it's an investment. I think it's a really good idea to have that transition time and that overlap, and I think the city will be very well served by it, so I'm glad the proposals come forth.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no further comments, I'll have a vote. All those in favor would vote by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none opposed, motion carries. Okay, the last item on the agenda, at the request of Alder Christensen, is a discussion and consideration of a city administrator position. Before we start that, I would like to say this is not about personalities. This is all about how to make the city more cost-effective, more streamlined, better able to respond to situations as they come up, unexpected situations. Whether we go forward or not with it, who knows, but it's not at all about people. It's about the best way to manage the city going forward in these challenging times. So with that, Alder Christensen, would you like to say something?
Sure, and I'll keep it fairly brief. When I was in Washburn, we implemented a city administrator in 1998. There were concerns that, it is an expensive position. There were concerns whether or not the city could afford it. 26 years later, they have a city administrator and an assistant city administrator. They found that after the first year, they actually saved more money than what the position cost. It was very well received. They are on their third. In a 26-year period, it's only been 3 city administrators. The first gentleman went back to law school and actually became a judge and ran for state Supreme Court a few years ago. The second individual, so he was for about 4 or 5 years. The second one was about that same 5 year. And then he became a regional head of WIDA, Pete Mann, and I was part of the personnel committee that was part of his hiring. The third person, Scott Kluver's been there for 13 years and has done an outstanding job. I've seen the kind of an impact it has on a community. This isn't something that's come up just recently for me. I've talked about and discussed a city administrator position since before I was on city council for probably 5 years. I just think it is something that would be a major benefit for the city of Stevens Point, so I would urge your support.
comments from the committee?
I'm happy to start. So I'm new to this body and newer to this community, but in previous communities, I've seen the model of a city administrator. It seems theoretically to provide an unbiased strategic implementer or driver of policies that city council has adopted as a representation every 2 years of what the people of that community wish. And so for that reason, I'm theoretically in favor of the concept. I recognize the delicacy of making a transition because of personnel and culture and what the community might perceive in that change. And so I'd be in favor of a transition, but one that is humane and timed out in a way that allows us to give people time to anticipate the change and to adapt, city staff especially, but the entire community to what would be a big change. I'll yield for now.
Anybody else?
I guess I can
Broderick?
say I pretty much agree with everything Alder Guthrie said there. It is a very large change that would need a deliberate and respectful transition. I can definitely appreciate the value that it would add. That is a very, very high-level position with some very specific credentials. I think we could definitely benefit from that kind of experience in our community. That being said, I guess I would just love to hear more from some of the department heads on if they have any thoughts they'd like to share in a public forum like this on if there are any potential pitfalls they would see there behind the financial cost, as well as any benefits there. They obviously would be the most impacted day to day by this type of decision. That's all I have to say about that for now.
Tim, anything?
I would look forward to hearing what our department heads have to say about it too. What sort of financial benefit, I guess, could be kind of like forecasted, or what the cost of implementing this would be. Those sort of things, understanding what it's going to mean, changing words in ordinance and that kind of thing. What does that actually come down to when we look at how much does it cost to run the city? And if there is cost savings by reorganizing, what are they? Or if there isn't, what is it? What would be? That's what I'm looking forward to hearing. What would be the other reasons that we'd be trying to move to this, if it's not for just a purely efficiency financial perspective? That's what I'm hoping to hear is what are the other concerns that we might be having? So with that, I look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Alder Steinmetz, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think it's important that we get feedback from the department heads. I think it is an interesting opportunity. Washburn, I believe, is a significantly smaller community. Isn't it 1/10 the size of Stevens Point, something like that? If they can have savings, I'm wondering if that could be extrapolated to a city or a community of our size, or if we could find an example of a city similar to ours making the transition to a city administrator, what kind of benefits or costs they saw from making that transition.
Very small. Thank you. When I was a urban planner with the city of Dallas, we worked under a city manager system there. It had been in place for several years before I started and is still in place now. There was a mayor as well who presided over the council meetings, made appointments to committees, much like what happens now. I agree with my fellow commissioners and with things that have been said. I think times and money constraints, technology changes so fast, things can come up that need to be taken care of immediately. I think we need to look for ways to bring the most expertise we can to our city staff. I think this perhaps is not the only position that we might look at in the future. I think the voters have done well with the people that they have elected, but you never know with the expertise that's needed for some of these elected positions. I'm thinking in terms of the city clerk, for example. We might want to look at something like that. I think this is part of a broader picture, truly, to have the city run as effectively and efficiently as possible, to do the most for the community and save the most dollars. So with that, I'll let Chief Kuso.
Again, I don't know all the ups and downs about the city administrator, but I do want to just point out, I agree with Alder Lang. One of the most important things, obviously, is to find out the cost savings.
Yep.
As you're all aware, every department here has taken a 0% increase in operational budget for, I believe this is the 5th year in a row. So if it costs any operational budget to any department, I think it's something that really needs to be looked at. And I usually don't ask for things, and I'm not a selfish person as a director or a chief, but in 2017, the council approved for us to have up to 49 officers. In 2017, we were allowed to hire 1 out of the 4. Since then, we have been told that there's no money in the budget, and I've asked for 1 officer per year for the next 3 years to get to our 49, and I've been told that the money is not available and that I would have to go to referendum. That would cost approximately $100,000 a year. This one position's $200,000 a year. And so again, I'm just asking, you all represent the citizens of Stevens Point, so please just do your due diligence to make sure that we're not getting any more budget cuts and find out where the savings would actually be.
Comments from other folks in the audience? Go ahead, sir. Come up to the, and name and address for the record, please.
253.
At the mic, so the folks that are watching can hear.
CHIARICO. I'm reluctant, and I'm reluctant for the reason that I knew Paul Borum. He was the last mayor to be part-time. That was nearly 50 years ago. Now, some of the finest mayors this town has ever had. Gary Westcott holds the record. I can only guess at it, of something like 12 or 16 years. But he did an excellent job of doing the upkeep. Jim Feigelson, I'm going to steal one of Jim Feigelson's remarks. If you're worried about having somebody you can't get rid of, Feigelson had it right, and that is, show me a mayor who can't pick up the garbage, and I'll show you a one-term mayor. It's very easy to have a one-term mayor, and it's tough to have a guy like Mike Wiesa for the long term. So there's loads of cost and benefit problems here, and to cut to the chase, the problem was solved almost 50 years ago. Why is it switching back to an administrator? Why make the change? And to me, one of the biggest emotional headaches of this community, we are not a poor community, and the economics of chiseling, you chisel your chief of police here. That's, well, this will get a laugh, but that's a crime. You're chiseling your fire department, and the damnedest thing is, that's a hidden tax, because not growing safety services in this community affects everyone's insurance rates. So that even if your costs go up by keeping, and this is only an opinion, a vastly underpaid mayor, I couldn't afford to be one. I'm a retired nuclear power technician. Well, I'll give you the technically correct. Nuclear power millwright. So you can't afford me, and we need to cook the books, I guess is the easiest thing to say. I have no solutions, but I watch a society around me since I retired take steps backwards. You're walking it back almost 50 years to the 70s, and I just plain can't see it. Thank you for listening to a doddering old man.
It's Paul.
Anybody else? Alder, go ahead. Yeah.
I was also a volunteer fireman.
Just a couple of thoughts. First of all, 114 cities have city administrators and a number of other villages, so it's not a new concept, and it's not something overly unique. It's something that's worked well in a lot of communities. The other thing is, I would also second, I think Mayor Wiese does an outstanding job, and I'm not proposing any reduction in that. There's a number of cities that have full-time city administrators and full-time mayors. So I don't see any change in there. I know there's, I think it's important. We talked about before how important it is having transition and helping in that. I think having him on board during while we have a new position like a city administrator would be invaluable. He's got a ton of institutional knowledge that he'd be able to share and would be able to help that person be even more successful immediately. So those are my thoughts.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
So the idea of a city administrator has happened a couple of times in the city's history. So it's not a new concept. What's important to note is that it's always gone back to the mayor system. For whatever reason, they've always been short-lived. Does that mean it won't work this time? No, it could work. Washburn has just over 2,000 people. And I don't have any data on what was saved, as Alderperson Christensen had mentioned, the savings, but I can tell you that the administrator is also the clerk and the zoning administrator. So having 3 positions in one person is probably a bit of a savings from what they had previously. I can't say that because I don't know what those savings are. In talking with Comptroller Treasurer, I think it was in his memo, we're looking at about $200,000 annually for a salary and benefits. That doesn't include the operational budget that the office would very likely have to have. That doesn't include office space, which the position would very likely have to have. And that doesn't include an administrative assistant, which is something that they would likely have to have unless the clerk wants to do all of it. So even at $200,000 a year, as the chief said, we have had a 0% increase in our operational budget for what will be 5 years in a row. We are limited by the state as to what we can levy. We carried over our capacity from last year to this year, which will leave us about 2.8% of an increase. Now, I don't know what the cost of living is going to be this year, but that is probably going to be close to 2.8%, which is going to take up most of what we have in capacity just to give the people that are already working for us a reasonable raise. For those of you that were here long enough, you remember when cost of living was 6 and 7% and we could do 2 or 3. As a matter of fact, we had budget cuts to hit 3% one year. And then the fact that every single person, every one of your directors needs more staff. To the point where the fire department is going to be going to a public referendum this fall to hire additional firefighters. The police department has staff approved that we can't afford. If you were going to pursue this, first of all, I'd see what the savings are. What do you expect will happen under the administrator that isn't happening now? And see if the savings are there. If the savings are there, maybe you can afford it. But I think with several of your department heads needing additional staff already, that the correct thing to do would be going to a public referendum to ask for a levy increase to support this. And we just sent out the capital budget today, the worksheets, so we'll be going over that over the next couple of months. For those of you here that were early for the meeting, we got about $7.5 million that we can spend, and we got about $15 million in requests from last year already. So budgets are tight. We try and be good stewards of the people's money, and that's why I think if you're going to do this, the people should say, yes, I'm willing to increase my taxes to pay for this.
I think this is too important a decision to make quickly. There's been some really good points raised, including the cost-benefit analysis. If we can't afford to hire firefighters, I mean, I would love to see a fire station on the east side, but there's no way we can afford to staff it. The city just doesn't have that kind of budget. So we're making do with what we can. The department heads that have done an amazing job with very little increase. But if something like this could make the city run more effectively and thus save some money in the long term, it's worth looking at, I think, and taking the amount of time to do something like this in the right way.
I just have one quick comment, not necessarily as a department head, but that if you're going to pursue the administrator route, I think it would be advantageous for this body to look at all of the elected positions. I can tell you I have an undergraduate degree in public administration, I have a master's degree in public administration. I cannot think of another municipality that would have an appointed city administrator, but an elected clerk, treasurer, and attorney. So if you're going to be looking at reorganizing, the basic function of city government, look at the whole picture, not just these kind of one-offs. Quite frankly, I've told a number of folks this, I'm pretty indifferent. I've worked for administrators. I think it's a really effective system. I think it's a really good system. I've worked for full-time mayors. I think that works really well as well. So I could say that, whatever you do, please look at all the positions, not just creating a new one as the administrator. So thank you.
Anybody else? Any recommendations from the committee on how we should go forward here? I'm not necessarily looking for a motion, but do you think we should? How do you think? What do you think?
I think the biggest question here is obviously financial. I would informally recommend that we maybe postpone discussion on this until we can see some specific numbers regarding the potential savings. I think financially this is just probably not a high enough priority to put off some of the other things that we've heard about today that have been pressing for quite some time. The budget is tight. I see the value. I think we need to see the numbers before we can really make any kind of decision on this.
Personally, I'd love for staff to provide us with example position descriptions of a city administrator and maybe a part-time and a full-time mayor alongside those, and what the duties of both would look like if we maintain the two positions, because part of this is role differentiation and finding out the sort of cost of maintaining two positions and whether or not they are both full-time and what their roles would be. So I would think we would all be well served in our decision-making if we saw that sample on paper and were able to debate actual routes forward, as it were. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We could carry this through to bring it back as a discussion item on the agenda for next month and provide some samples. I know there are things out there, job descriptions, things like that, that we could bring back to the committee to look at. I'm not sure how quickly we could do a cost analysis, but
just position descriptions. If there were a part-time mayor plus a full-time city administrator, what division of roles and responsibilities would look like? And then a full-time mayor and a full-time city administrator, what roles would be delineated in one versus the other? Providing draft position descriptions for a scenario A and a scenario B would help us. Is that something that could be provided in time for next personnel meeting a month from now?
I could help with that too, and I think Alder Christensen has some.
So would we be looking at like our comparatives that we've done from the pay plan? Well, I don't know if they have city administration or.
I think what they'd be looking for, like Washburn, for example, has an administrator and a mayor. What are the duties?
Yeah, I have some.
Duties and educational credentials and things like that. Yeah, so if we were to post a Plan A or post a position for a Plan B, what would those position descriptions look like?
Yep, I can get that.
That would be wonderful, thank you.
That'd be a good start, for sure.
Hi. So I just wanted to throw something out there just to avoid anybody drawing a conclusion from this that based on the most recent comments I think is susceptible that people might draw. A part-time versus full-time mayor is not actually a legal distinction. There's just a mayor, and it has a role under the statutes. And based upon what other positions you have and what structure you have and what salary that position is provided, there's just sort of an understanding of what that position is going to be like in terms of workload, in terms of presence in the office. So while we can say that we have a full-time mayor in the sense that there is no other position in the city that is a unifying management function over top of the department heads, it's just kind of understood that's going to be the role of the mayor. By changing that, you don't necessarily go from it being full-time to part-time or whatever. So the way that it would actually look on paper to make a transition of that type, though, is that you'd have to go through literally every chapter of the ordinances, every part of our city policy, and identify what roles have we created via those documents for the mayor's office. There's roles for the mayor's office, explicitly with regards to certain human resource functions, with regards to the mayor doing the performance evaluations of the department heads, that sort of thing. Presumptively, if you change the city administrator, that person would take over those roles. But not just by waving the magic city administrator wand, by going through and finding those individual, keyword search a bunch of documents and make a bunch of replacements. And a lot of those are probably going to require a little more crafting of how that's going to look. So I didn't want anybody, especially people listening at home, audience members, to think part-time mayor versus full-time mayor. There's just a mayor, and that the role of the mayor as the president of the council, or excuse me, not the president of the council, but the tie-breaking vote on the council and all that stuff, and the role of the mayor in signing actions of the council or vetoing them, that doesn't change regardless of the structure. So that's all.
Thank you. Okay.
I do see a puzzled look on Alder Guthrie's face. So
The puzzled look is that the power of the mayor is defined by statute, right? And ordinances, and it doesn't seem to be the case that your last statement was that those powers do not change.
They do not change. The veto power of the mayor is statutory, as opposed to something under our ordinances. So I just meant that would remain consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, yes, sir.
Just a philosophical thing. As you're going through this, the first question we should be asking ourselves is, why? What is not working now that could be working, and how is it going to make it better? Once you have that answer, then you figure out the how. And if that means cutting a position somewhere else to fund it, or going to a public referendum to increase the levy, but following that process, what is the benefit? And think about that as you're going through.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Okay. So we'll try to bring, I'll talk about it again next month. We'll look at,
I had a comment. One of the things that because I would look forward to discussing it next month, is a little bit of what would a recommendation from our finances entail? Like if we had would they need some resources to do a study? I guess would be one of the questions I have. If we're looking at this from the financial benefit, where do we get that information from? Where's that coming from? Is it a study that we need to do? Because if we do, maybe we postpone till after we have that study. That would be my only concern.
So, speaking from a staff perspective, I think we can go to our peers.
Okay.
There are several cities in Wisconsin that have an administrator and mayor, and we can see what the benefits were usually, right? Going back to Washburn, you said 1990-something? I don't know if there's anybody there that can say why, but someone should have some records. In the first place we would start is places like the League of Municipalities, or contacting our peers that have an administrator and a mayor and saying, why? Why do you do this? What is different? Did you change from having a mayor and then you went to the administrator? If so, why? What benefits did you see? And just asking the same questions that I would expect we'd be asking here of those peers.
Okay.
So I don't think it'll be like paying somebody outside
Good.
to do this. But it may take more than a month, but we'll see.
yeah, I'm willing to make some phone calls rather than spend some money. I've got the time. Just to see, it's a very good point, Alderling, to find out. And
I would ask that you let HR handle it, or another staff designee, just so cities aren't getting multiple calls from the same city. It'll get a little confusing when 3 people call Washburn and say, hey, what's going on?
I think probably between Sandy and I, we can come up with.
That sounds great.
We could work up a set of standard questions, and then you can choose some cities, I'll choose some cities, and we can just call and ask the same questions and come back next month with some of that, and also with some job descriptions to look at and kind of go from there.
All right, thanks.
Sound good? Anybody else? Last call. Okay, with that, we are adjourned at 6:59.